So today we're going to be making the classic Northern Italian rice porridge known as risotto. Risotto is a dish that much more emphasis is placed on the technique than the ingredients themselves. Constant agitation and friction removes surface starch, which in turn thickens the cooking liquid, and this is what results in a porridge-like consistency. There are alternatives out there for making risotto, but today we're going to be focusing on the classic Italian method. So let's not waste any more time and let's get to it. So today we're going to be making a mushroom risotto, and for that we're going to need to cut up one 8-ounce package of cremini mushrooms. You can use whatever mushrooms you like here. I'm using these creminis because they're widely available. We can go ahead and get the rest of our aromatics out of the way as well here. Start by cutting one shallot into a small dice or 1/4 inch squares. And you've probably seen this in other videos, but in case you haven't, a good way to peel garlic is to slightly smash it with the side of your knife, and as you can see here, it makes separating the skin and flesh much easier. It is not necessary to completely obliterate the garlic when doing this. A small amount of force should break it loose. So go ahead and mince up 2 cloves of garlic and combine them with the shallots, and we can go over a few cookware options because you want to make sure you're using the right tool for the job. First up, this type of pan is called a rondo or a brazier. This is typically what restaurants use when making risotto, although theirs is much bigger than the one I have here. But if you're cooking for a decent number of people, this might be a good choice. You can use a saute pan if you want, but be aware you will have more surface evaporation, so make sure you have enough stock to work with for this. In most cases though, one of these 2 pans is going to be your best option. We're actually going to be using this one today, so what do you say we get back to it? Okay, the first thing we need to do is get our mushrooms going. Place your pan over medium heat, add a small amount of olive oil along with your mushrooms. Add a pinch of salt, stir them, and this should take about 5 minutes, and while that's going, let's go over some terminology. The term risotto specifically refers to rice being cooked by this method. Riso is an Italian word meaning rice, so when other grains are prepared by the same method, it takes on the name of that particular grain. When farro is cooked using the risotto method, it is called farrotto, or in the case of orzo, it is referred to as orzotto. Rice is grown in northern Italy in the Lombardia region. The most common rices used for making risotto are carnaroli and arborio. Arborio is much easier to find, so that's what we're going to be using today. Okay, checking back in on our mushrooms, it's been about 5 minutes and they've released most of their moisture, so we can set them aside for now. Place a pot with 4.5 cups of chicken stock over medium heat to heat up. Add a small amount of olive oil to the main pan and add the shallots and garlic. Once they become softened, add 8 ounces of the arborio rice and continue to stir the rice until it becomes lightly toasted but not brown. This takes about 3 or 4 minutes, and what you're looking for is for the outer portion of the grain to turn translucent, and you'll see a white dot on the inner portion. Once you've reached that point, go ahead and add 2 ounces or 1/4 cup of white wine, and we're going to cook this until the pan almost completely dries up. You'll be able to drag a spatula across the bottom of the pan like you see here, and at this point we can proceed with our first addition of stock. I'm going to add roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of the stock to the pan and continue to stir it until it is almost completely absorbed. This constant friction from stirring removes the starch from the surface and incorporates it into the cooking liquid. When you have once again reached the point that you can drag a spatula across like this, you can move forward with the second addition of stock. The reason we are incrementally adding the stock is because keeping everything concentrated allows for more agitation on the rice grains. You'll notice that I'm also running the spatula along the sides of the pan. Residual starch and concentrated stock builds up during the cooking process. Incorporating that back in adds flavor from the stock, and the starch will contribute to the consistency of the final product. Okay, now that the second addition of stock has been absorbed, go ahead and add the third and final addition of stock. Usually the ratio for making risotto is around 4 parts stock to 1 part rice by weight. I usually start with slightly more than that to account for any excess evaporation, so I am going to leave a little bit of stock left over in the pan. The reason we keep the stock hot is so that the cooking process with the grains is uninterrupted. Allowing the rice to cool down will only make this process more time consuming. Once the rice has mostly absorbed this batch of stock, give it a taste and adjust the seasonings, and we can go ahead and add our mushrooms back in. Once the rice becomes tender, turn off the heat and add 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 ounces of grated Parmesan cheese. Italians describe a properly cooked risotto as allonde, or wave-like as you see here. It should be a bit jiggly and porridge-like. Anyway, let's go ahead and plate this thing up. This one's pretty simple, just pour a little bit into a bowl, add some finely chopped parsley on top, and that's it. So with that, we've reached the end of the video. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.